The night the most feared mafia boss in Seoul humiliated a little girl, no one in that ballroom realized they were witnessing the moment his entire life would change. The Imperial Crown Hotel in Gangnam glittered like a palace. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above a ballroom filled with the most powerful people in South Korea: politicians, billionaires, celebrities, and art patrons. Luxury gowns brushed across marble floors. Expensive suits whispered through the crowd. A grand piano sat on a raised stage in the center of the room like a silent king waiting to be awakened. Tonight was the annual Seoul Cultural Excellence Gala, an elite charity event meant to support young musical talent. But everyone knew the real reason the room was packed. At exactly 8:15 p.m., the heavy ballroom doors opened. The atmosphere instantly changed. Conversations stopped. Even the orchestra paused. Because the man who just walked in did not belong to the world of charity. He ruled something far darker. Kang Jae-minute, chairman of the powerful Black Lotus Syndicate. A man whispered about in police stations and government halls. A man whose name could make powerful businessmen sweat. Tall. Impeccably dressed in a black tailored suit. His sharp jawline and cold eyes gave him the presence of someone who had never lost a battle in his life. Behind him followed several silent bodyguards. People quickly lowered their voices. Some smiled nervously. Others pretended not to notice him at all. Because everyone knew one thing. You did not attract the attention of Kang Jae-minute unless you wanted trouble. At the front of the ballroom stood Madame Han Se-jin, the elegant director of the Cultural Foundation hosting the event. She bowed politely. "Chairman Kang. It's an honor that you accepted our invitation tonight." Jae-minute gave a faint nod. "I support talent," he said calmly. But the truth was different. He hadn't come for charity. He had come out of boredom. And boredom was dangerous for a man like him. The evening continued. Wine glasses clinked. Guests mingled. Young musicians were introduced one by one. Some played violin. Others performed short piano pieces. Polite applause filled the room. But none of it impressed Jae-minute. He leaned lazily in his chair, swirling a glass of whiskey. "Pathetic," he muttered quietly. Then Madame Han stepped onto the stage again. Her smile carried a hint of excitement. "And now, our final performer tonight." She paused. This young musician traveled very far to be here. A murmur spread through the audience. The stage lights shifted. "And she may be the most gifted pianist we have ever discovered." Then Madame Han said the name. "Please welcome Zara Okoye." Soft footsteps echoed across the stage. A small figure appeared. The entire room froze. Because standing under the chandelier light was not the elegant Prodigy everyone expected. It was a thin 13-year-old African girl wearing a simple blue dress. Her curly hair was tied gently behind her head. Her shoes looked worn. She looked completely out of place in a room filled with diamonds and designer fashion. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Who invited her? Is this a charity stunt? Is she even trained? Jae-minute raised one eyebrow. His cold eyes studied the girl. Zara walked slowly toward the piano bench. Her hands trembled slightly. But her eyes remained calm. Madame Han spoke into the microphone again. Zara was discovered performing in a small community center in Itaewon. Her teachers say she possesses a once-in-a-generation gift. But before she could continue, a voice cut through the ballroom. Low, cold, and dangerously amused. "Gift." Every head turned. Kang Jae-minute leaned back in his chair, looking directly at the girl on stage. The faintest smirk appeared on his lips. A child from the streets playing for Seoul's elite. A few nervous laughs escaped from nearby tables. Jae-minute took a slow sip of whiskey. This is supposed to be a gala for excellence. His gaze sharpened. Not a charity showcase. The words landed like knives. Zara stood frozen beside the piano. Hundreds of eyes stared at her. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others whispered. Madame Han's face tightened with embarrassment. But Jae-minute wasn't finished. He tilted his head slightly, studying the girl. "Tell me something," he said coldly. Do you actually believe you belong on that stage? The ballroom went completely silent. Even the air felt heavy. For a moment. Zara didn't answer. Her fingers slowly brushed the edge of the piano keys. Then she looked directly at the most feared man in Seoul. And quietly said something that would soon shake the entire room. Sir. Her voice was soft. But music doesn't care who belongs. The room held its breath. Jaemin's smirk widened. Then play, he said coldly. Let's see if you're worth the noise. Zara slowly sat down at the grand piano. Her small hands hovered over the keys. The entire ballroom watched. Some with curiosity. Others with pity. But no one knew that in the next few minutes, the most powerful mafia boss in Seoul would hear something that would shatter the walls he had built around his heart. And the girl he just humiliated was about to change his life forever. The ballroom of the Imperial Crown Hotel had never been so quiet. More than 200 of Seoul's most powerful elites sat frozen in their seats, watching a 13-year-old girl sitting alone at a grand piano. At the center of the room, the enormous black Steinway gleamed under the chandelier light like a stage waiting for a miracle. Zara Okoye sat upright on the piano bench. Her feet barely touched the pedals. Her fingers hovered just above the ivory keys. And across the room, Kang Jae-min watched her with cold amusement. The feared mafia boss leaned lazily in his chair, one arm resting over the back. His glass of whiskey reflected the chandelier light. To him, this was nothing more than a moment of entertainment. A child about to embarrass herself in front of Seoul's elite. His bodyguards stood silently behind him, their eyes scanning the room. No one spoke. No one moved. The tension was so thick it felt like the air itself had stopped breathing. Zara closed her eyes. For a moment, the insults she had just endured echoed in her mind. Charity case. Does she belong here? Her chest tightened. But then another memory appeared. A small dusty community center in Itaewon. An old piano with chipped keys. Her mother sitting in the corner, smiling proudly. Play like the world is listening, her mother used to say. Zara inhaled slowly. And then, her fingers touched the keys. The first note drifted into the room. Soft. Pure. Almost fragile. At first, a few guests barely reacted. Some still whispered quietly. Kang Jae-min lifted his glass to take another sip. But then the second note came. And the third. The melody began to form like a quiet sunrise. Gentle waves of sound rolled through the ballroom. Heads slowly turned toward the stage. The whispers stopped. The music grew deeper. Zara's fingers moved with unexpected confidence, dancing across the piano like they had lived there their entire life. The melody began weaving emotion into the air. Sadness. Hope. Loneliness. Strength. Each note seemed to tell a story. A story of a girl who had crossed oceans. A story of a child who had faced humiliation but refused to break. Within 30 seconds, the ballroom was completely silent. Wine glasses stopped halfway to lips. Waiters froze beside their trays. Even the orchestra musicians standing near the stage stared in disbelief. Because what they were hearing was impossible. The music pouring from the piano was not the work of a child. It was the voice of a master. A deep, emotional composition that wrapped itself around every heart in the room. Across the ballroom, Kang Jae-min slowly lowered his glass. His eyes narrowed slightly. Something unexpected had just happened. The arrogant smirk that had rested on his face moments earlier began to fade. He leaned forward in his chair. The music continued to rise. Zara's hands moved faster now, flowing across the keys like water over stones. The melody transformed. From quiet sorrow to powerful determination. The sound filled the enormous ballroom walls, echoing off crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Some guests exchanged stunned glances. Others simply stared at the girl. A famous violinist seated near the front whispered under his breath. That technique. It's extraordinary. Madame Han Se-jin stood near the stage, her eyes wide with disbelief. Even she had not expected this level of brilliance. But the person most affected by the music was Kang Jae-min. At first he listened out of curiosity. Then something changed. The melody struck a memory buried deep inside him. A memory he had not visited in years. A small apartment in Busan. A broken upright piano by the window. A young boy practicing scales while his mother cooked in the kitchen. Before the violence. Before the syndicate. Before he became the most feared man in Seoul's underworld. For a moment. The mafia boss wasn't a crime lord anymore. He was just that boy again. Zara's music soared into a powerful crescendo. Her fingers struck the keys with stunning precision. The emotional intensity in the room became overwhelming. A woman in the audience quietly wiped tears from her eyes. A famous composer leaned forward in shock. Even Jaemin's bodyguards looked stunned. Then came the final movement. Zara's hands slowed. The melody softened. The storm of emotion gradually faded into a gentle whisper of notes. Like waves calming after a powerful tide. Her final chord echoed through the ballroom. And then, silence. Total silence. For several seconds, no one moved. It was as if the room itself needed time to breathe again. Zara slowly lifted her hands from the piano. Her heart pounded in her chest. She stood up quietly. Her eyes lowered. Waiting. Then suddenly, one pair of hands began to clap. The sound echoed sharply in the quiet room. Everyone turned. The applause was coming from the most unexpected person in the entire ballroom. Kang Jae-min. The feared mafia boss stood slowly from his chair. His expression had changed. The cold arrogance was gone. His eyes were fixed on the girl. And for the first time that evening, he looked shaken. The applause grew louder. Soon the entire ballroom erupted into a thunderous standing ovation. 200 powerful elites stood on their feet clapping for the girl they had doubted only minutes earlier. But Zara barely noticed the crowd. Because Kang Jae-min had begun walking toward the stage. And the look in his eyes suggested that something far deeper than admiration was about to happen. The humiliation that had begun this night was about to turn into something no one in that room could have predicted. And the most feared mafia boss in Seoul was about to reveal a secret from his past that would change everything. The thunderous applause inside the Imperial Crown Ballroom continued to roar like a storm. 200 powerful guests stood on their feet, clapping for the small girl who had just stunned them with a performance no one would forget. But the person who shocked the room the most was Kang Jae-min. The feared mafia boss of the Black Lotus Syndicate was walking toward the stage. Every step he took echoed across the marble floor. His bodyguards immediately followed behind him, scanning the room carefully. Whispers spread among the elite guests. Why is Chairman Kang going to the stage? Is he angry? Did the girl offend him somehow? But the look on Jaemin's face was not anger. It was something far stranger. Something almost human. On stage, Zara Okoye stood beside the piano, her small hands clasped together nervously. The applause slowly faded as the mafia boss approached the steps leading up to the stage. Madam Han Sejin stepped aside quickly. No one in Seoul would dare block Kang Jae-min's path. He climbed the stage slowly. The entire ballroom watched. Zara looked up at him cautiously. Up close, the man seemed even more intimidating. Tall. Broad-shouldered. His dark suit perfectly tailored. His sharp eyes studying her carefully. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jae-min glanced down at the piano. His hand brushed lightly against the glossy black surface. His expression changed again. A shadow of memory crossed his face. Finally, he spoke. You said something earlier. His deep voice carried easily through the silent ballroom. Zara swallowed nervously. Yes, sir. Jae-min looked directly at her. You said music doesn't care who belongs. He paused. Then something surprising happened. The feared mafia boss gave a small nod. You were right. Gasps rippled across the room. No one had ever heard Kang Jae-min admit he was wrong. But his voice continued calmly. That performance was extraordinary. The crowd murmured in disbelief. Zara blinked in surprise. But Jae-min wasn't finished. He turned slightly, looking out at the audience of elites. You all looked at this girl and saw someone who didn't belong here. His tone sharpened slightly. But what I heard was genius. The room became silent again. Then J-Minute looked back at Zara. Where did you learn to play like that? Zara hesitated. My mother taught me when I was little, she said softly. We had a piano at the community center in Itaewon. J-Minute's eyes narrowed slightly. Itaewon? Zara nodded. My mother works there. The Mafia boss fell quiet for a moment. Something about that answer stirred another memory. But before he could ask more questions, one of his bodyguards stepped forward urgently. Chairman. The man leaned close and whispered something into J-Minute's ear. The Mafia boss's expression changed instantly. The warmth in his eyes vanished. Cold calculation returned. What did you say? J-Minute asked quietly. The bodyguard whispered again. This time longer. J-Minute slowly turned his gaze back toward Zara. But now he was studying her differently. Carefully. Almost suspiciously. Because the message his bodyguard had just delivered contained shocking information. Information about the girl standing in front of him. Meanwhile, across the ballroom, a man in a gray suit quietly slipped toward the exit. He had been watching Zara's performance with unusual attention. Now his eyes were filled with worry. Because he recognized the girl. And if Kang J-Minute discovered the truth about her, the situation could become very dangerous. Back on stage, J-Minute spoke again. Zara. She looked up nervously. Yes. His voice was calm, but heavy. Your mother, what is her name? Amora Okoye. The name hit J-Minute like a silent explosion. For a brief second, the powerful Mafia boss looked completely stunned. Because that name was not unfamiliar to him. In fact, it was a name connected to a secret from his past. A secret buried more than a decade ago. J-Minute turned slowly toward his bodyguard. Bring me the file, he said quietly. The bodyguard nodded and quickly stepped away. Zara watched this exchange with confusion. Did I do something wrong? She asked nervously. J-Minute looked at her again. For the first time, there was something almost protective in his expression. No, he said calmly. You did nothing wrong. But inside his mind, questions were racing. Could it really be her? After all these years? Moments later, the bodyguard returned holding a thin digital tablet. He handed it to J-Minute discreetly. The Mafia boss looked down at the screen. Several photographs appeared. One of them showed a younger woman. A woman standing beside an old piano. A woman with warm eyes. And standing next to her in the photo was a young Kang J-Minute. The blood drained slightly from his face. He looked up at Zara again. Now the resemblance was unmistakable. The same eyes. The same quiet strength. The girl in front of him was not just a musical prodigy. She was the daughter of the one person who had once believed he could become something better than a criminal. Across the ballroom, the mysterious man in the gray suit had stopped near the exit. He watched the stage with growing fear. Because he realized something terrible. Kang J-Minute had just discovered who the girl really was. And if the enemies of the Black Lotus Syndicate learned about Zara, the child who had just captivated Seoul's elite could suddenly become the most vulnerable target in the city. Back on stage, J-Minute slowly lowered the tablet. His voice was quieter now. Almost gentle. Zara. She looked at him again. Yes. The Mafia boss took a slow breath. Then he said something that stunned the entire ballroom. I think we need to talk about your mother. Because the night that had started as a simple music gala had just turned into something far more dangerous. And Zara Okoye had no idea that the most feared Mafia boss in Korea had just decided to protect her. The ballroom of the Imperial Crown Hotel remained silent after Kang J-Minute's shocking words. I think we need to talk about your mother. 200 guests watched the stage in confusion. No one understood what the feared Mafia boss meant. But J-Minute understood perfectly. The name Amora Okoye had reopened a chapter of his life he thought had been buried forever. He slowly looked at Zara again. The resemblance was undeniable now. The same determined eyes. The same quiet confidence. Memories flooded his mind. 15 years ago, before the world knew him as the ruthless leader of the Black Lotus Syndicate, Kang Jae-minute had once been a struggling young man in Busan. Back then, he had only two things in his life: a broken piano and a dream. Music had been his escape from the harsh streets he grew up in. But life had other plans. Violence, debt, crime. Little by little, the dream had died. The piano had been abandoned. And Jae-minute had become the man the world feared today. But there was one person who had believed in him during those days. A young woman studying music. Amora Okoye. She had volunteered at a small community center where Jae-minute sometimes practiced late at night. She had encouraged him. Told him he had talent. Told him his music had soul. For a brief moment in time, she had made him believe he could become something better. But fate separated them. She left Busan. And Jae-minute fell deeper into the world of crime. Now, standing in front of him was her daughter. And the girl carried the same gift her mother once recognized in him. Jae-minute turned toward Madame Han. "Bring Zara's mother here tomorrow," he said calmly. Madame Han nodded quickly. "Of course, Chairman Kang." But at that moment, one of his bodyguards stepped forward again, urgency in his voice. "Chairman, we have a problem." Jae-minutte's eyes hardened instantly. "What is it?" The bodyguard lowered his voice. "Our informants say members of the Crimson Serpent gang were seen outside the hotel." Several guests near the stage overheard the name and gasped. The Crimson Serpent gang was the Black Lotus Syndicate's most dangerous rival. A brutal criminal organization that had been trying to challenge Jae-minutte's power in Seoul for years. The bodyguard continued quietly. "They may have followed you here tonight." Jae-minutte's expression turned cold. Then his eyes slowly shifted toward Zara. And suddenly the danger became clear. If the Crimson Serpents discovered that Kang Jae-minute cared about someone, that person could become a target. He turned to his security team immediately. "Double the guards around the building." "Yes, Chairman." "And escort the girl safely to the Foundation office." Zara blinked in confusion. Did something happen? Jae-minute looked down at her. For the first time in many years, the ruthless Mafia boss felt something unfamiliar. Responsibility. "No," he said calmly. "But you are under my protection now." The words sent a wave of whispers through the ballroom. The most feared man in Seoul had just publicly declared protection over a 13-year-old girl. No one in the criminal underworld would dare challenge that openly. But Jae-minute wasn't finished. He turned to face the entire ballroom. His voice carried with quiet authority. "Tonight I made a mistake." The elites exchanged stunned looks. "Earlier, I judged this girl before hearing her play." He paused. "But her music reminded me of something I had forgotten." The room listened carefully. Talent does not belong to wealth. His eyes returned to Zara. It belongs to courage. Madame Han watched in amazement. She had never seen this side of Kang Jae-minute before. Then the Mafia boss made an announcement that shocked everyone in the room. "Starting tonight," he said firmly, "the Black Lotus Cultural Foundation will fund a full international scholarship for Zara Okoye." The ballroom erupted with shocked murmurs. But Jae-minute continued. "She will study at the best music academies in the world." Zara's eyes widened. "And this foundation will sponsor young musicians from disadvantaged communities across Korea." Madame Han covered her mouth in disbelief. Jae-minute turned slightly toward her. "Prepare the program immediately." "Yes, Chairman." Then he looked back at Zara. "Your performance tonight reminded me what music can do." Zara spoke softly. "My mother always says music can change people." For the first time that evening, Kang Jae-minute smiled slightly. She was right. The ballroom erupted into applause again. But this time the applause was not just for Zara. It was for the transformation they had all witnessed. A feared Mafia boss had walked into the gala with arrogance. And left having rediscovered the part of himself he thought was gone forever. As security escorted Zara safely away, Jae-minute stood quietly beside the piano. His fingers brushed the keys gently. A single soft note echoed through the emptying ballroom. For the first time in years, Kang Jae-minute was thinking about music again. And somewhere in the city of Seoul, a little girl who had once been humiliated by the most powerful man in the room had just become the reason that man chose to change. Because sometimes the most powerful weapon in the world is not money, or fear, or power. Sometimes it's a simple song played by a brave heart. And on that night in Seoul, a 13-year-old girl's music had done something no enemy had ever managed to do. It had reached the heart of a mafia boss and changed it forever.